Fear Factor, 15 minutes to your ideal retirement. Seminar 9. Is there really a way to keep what's earned in good years and not lose in bad years? Hello, this is Adrienne Berg with financial advisor Ronald Gielak, answering your questions in a 12-part webinar series on how to retire and live the life you love and deserve. This is the 9th webinar in the series, and you can find the other 8 at ronaldgielak.com. That's G-E-L-O-K. In the preceding webinar, we asked you, how many thousands per month tax-free do you want as an income stream? In this webinar, we go further and ask, is there really a way to keep what's earned in the good years and not lose in the bad years? Ron, thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Adrienne.
You know, you've pointed out the devastating effect of loss, particularly around retirement age and right after retirement age, and as we get into our 80s and 90s. Now, that's really a terrible time for the stock market bubble to burst. Please explain the effect of a recession to us. You've done this before, but I really think we have to start out to see how much there really is to lose if there's a pullback in the stock market.
Yeah, it's really concerning right now in particular because of where we are in the economic cycle and how high the market is. And I'm reminded of a client, or actually it was a prospective client that I met with several years ago, and this was at a similar point in time where the market was nearing a peak, and he came into the office and his mindset was, I want a financial advisor who's going to assure me that I'm going to make 12% per year every year, because if I can't get that, we're not a good fit for one another. And I said, you know what, we're not a good fit for one another because nobody can guarantee you that, and I'm not going to make a promise that I can't keep. And so, you know, we shook hands, we parted friends, and lo and behold, a couple years later, after the market had the major dump that it took, you know, where the market dropped 39%, I actually ran into this gentleman in the Home Depot, and he wasn't shopping at Home Depot. He was working there with the orange vest.
Yep.
And he kind of sheepishly came over to me and asked me if I had remembered him, and I said, yeah. And he said, you know, you were right. I should have gotten safer.
All right. Well, you know, one of the things, it's very easy for us to forget in bull markets and in rah-rah times what can happen. And you've pointed out to us that the market has recessions, that we experience a recession at least every 8 years. But how long does it take to recover, and why is it so tough when it's right before, right after retirement?
Well, I think a lot of times when we're still actively at work and we see a bear market occur, we don't really realize the full impact of that because our paycheck is coming in and we've got new money coming out of each paycheck funding the 401k. So there's dollar cost averaging working for us. But once we're retired and there's no paycheck coming in, the effect of a bear market can be devastating. If you think about something, the Standard & Poor's 500 index, which is kind of a broad representation of the overall market, dropped almost 39% in 2008. So that's almost a 40% decline. Now, if there's a 40% decline, you need a 67% increase just to get your money back to where it was. Now, let's suppose at the same time you're retired and maybe you're taking 5 or 6% out that year for income. So if you, in effect, are down 45% instead of 40% because of an income withdrawal, now you need an 82% increase just to get your principal back to where it was. And most people will say, well, gosh, if that happened to me, I don't know what I would do. I don't want to have to go back to work. Yet people are being blindly, well, they're being blind about it.
Yeah, I know. We're quite slavish because, you know, there is a feeling of greed and euphoria when we see a market going up. And I did want you to give exactly that statistic you did. You need to make 67% to make up for a 40% loss, because I think we all have a gut feeling that we would like to protect against loss, but we really don't realize how devastating it is. And of course, we don't have the time to make up for it if we're right before or right after retirement. So one of the things that you've said to us, and it always has seemed too good to be true in all of our webinars, is that there are guarantees against loss if we look at certain systems. Could you please explain how we can guarantee against loss if we have particular kind of systems that you help us craft?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting that you bring this up, Adrian, because the way we came to this system is by listening to our clients, because clients would come into the office and they would tell us, here's what I'm looking for. I would like to have a portion of my retirement savings positioned in such a way that I don't have to worry about that money going backwards in the event of a bear market, or I don't have to worry about that money going backwards in the event that interest rates go up and bonds go down. And I'd like to have that money positioned where I've got a chance or an opportunity to make a reasonable rate of return on my money. And is there any way that I could harness the upside of the market and maybe profit in the good years and avoid losses in the down years? And I'm concerned about longevity. Is there any way I could have a program or a system that could guarantee me a lifetime income? So that set me researching the world of annuities. And quite frankly, there's lots of annuities that you wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. There's some annuities that have ridiculous fees and expenses, and there's some annuities that don't have meaningful guarantees. But that doesn't mean that all annuities are no good. There's actually a handful that are ideal for a retiree or a pre-retiree to position a portion of retirement savings for safety and guarantees.
You know, the reason I think that we're so skeptical is that we're always hearing that there are no guarantees, particularly with mutual funds or individual stocks or even with bond rates. Even by law, by SEC law, you know, we have to be very careful to say that there's a guarantee. So how come with an annuity or various insurance products, there can be this guarantee that even if the stock market goes down or your index goes down or whatever you're linked to goes down, there's a floor below which you cannot go? How could there be a guarantee in one arena and not a guarantee in another arena?
Well, because we're really talking about two different arenas, and I'll give you an example. A lot of times people will come in and they'll say, you know, I'm looking for some help managing my money, and I want to explore what's out there in the universe of managed investment accounts, and do you have access to portfolios that are managed with capital preservation in mind and income generation as a goal? And are there any money managers out there that maybe didn't lose money in 2002 or 2008 that we could look at? And I'll say, sure, we have access to those programs, and we often recommend them to clients. But then when the client asks me the question, is this guaranteed? Is this guaranteed not to lose money? Is this guaranteed to produce a particular rate of return? I have to say no. Past performance is no guarantee of future results when we're dealing with investments and securities. But when we're talking about contracts from insurance companies, these are not classified as investments. These are not classified as securities. They are contracts between an individual and an insurance company where we can legitimately say that there's guarantees in place. And we can't use this word guarantee when we're talking about risk-based investments.
You know, I want to make something very clear and why it's so important that you have an expert like Ron Gielach. And it's brought back to me over and over again, honestly. Ron is an attorney by background. These are contracts. And unfortunately, they're all called annuities or index life or some words. And all these words apply to so many different kinds of contracts. And as Ron points out, some are good for you and some aren't. Instead of using these, you know, words that are emotionally charged, you'll read about, oh, annuities aren't good, or they pay too little, or the commissions are so high. You know, some are and some aren't. But those that are do carry that magic guarantee of a floor. Now, let's get as specific as we can, Ron. what is the guarantee really? Is it a floor below which you can't go, or does it stabilize your portfolio as of a certain date? And what price do you pay for that? Because we're all realistic. We want to do the best for our money. You pay a price for everything. What price do you pay to get that true guarantee?
Well, let's use an example just to make it easy for everybody to understand. Let's say a person says, all right, I have this $100,000 over here, and I'm going to take this $100,000 and I'm going to deposit it with an insurance company into an annuity contract. And it's a fixed annuity contract. And let's say it's a fixed annuity contract that offers index-linked interest and perhaps has a rider that offers lifetime income guarantees. What does all that vocabulary or terminology really mean? It means that, number one, we know we're never going to get a statement that says that our annuity went backwards if the stock market went backwards. So because this is categorized as a fixed annuity, we know that all fixed annuities have something in common. They don't go backwards, they only go forwards. So when we talk about index-linked interest, we're able to link our rate of interest to the performance of an external market index like the S&P 500 or the Dow or the NASDAQ or some other index. Now, where the catch comes in, and it's not a bad catch, it's just that you're not getting 100% of the gains if you're protected against 100% of the losses. So you have some caps on the earnings. So if you look at it, and let's say a company capped the earnings at 2% per month, or 1.5% per month, or 1.8% per month. Well, if it was 2% per month, you'd know the most that could ever be earned is 24%. But let's say there was a year where the market went up consistently and that gain was produced. Okay, that gain, once credited, is now part of the principal. So if the following year is a repeat of 2008 and the index falls off a cliff and goes backwards 39%, none of the prior gain that was credited the prior year is lost. It's still there.
And that's the case year after year.
Well, yeah, and most of the people that we serve, Adrienne, their mindset is they're not looking to hit a home run every year. They're perfectly content with getting some of the gains, locking those gains in good years, as long as they don't have to give back any of those gains in the bad years. And we all know the bad years occur just like the good years occur.
You know, we said in our very first webinar that people should be making a system and not a plan. And this is what we mean. When we make a plan, we can't keep to that plan if the stock market is not planning with us. And if we could make all the right numbers, all of the right decisions on day one, but if on day 10 the stock market changes, our plan is out the window. When we have a system, as Ron Gilak is suggesting, we have more than just a plan. We also have enough guarantees built in to know that we can carry out that plan. Now, part of that plan for most of your clients, Ron, is to have tax-free income, and to have tax-free income all of your life. And you are a tax-free income strategist. So I would like you to go on to a different feature, which we sometimes also think is too good to be true, but it is real. And that is how to use your own borrowed funds to create a tax-free income stream and how that works.
Right, right. Well, we were just using the example of using an indexed annuity from an insurance company. But if we shift gears a little bit and we say, okay, what if there's a need to tie in some life insurance? Well, now we have something called indexed life. Now, there's provisions in the tax code that are particularly favorable towards life insurance. Provisions that say, you know, your money is growing free from current taxes. Provisions that say, well, if you take a tax-free policy loan, you can pull money out, and that money reduces the death benefit by the amount that you're taking. yet those spendable dollars are not taxed as income because they're characterized as loan proceeds. And what we're able to do, and I don't want to say it's unique, but it does take, I guess I'd say, some specialized knowledge, is we're able to reverse engineer an investment-grade indexed life policy to perform potentially in a superior fashion. And then the way we do this is we say, okay, well, what if we design this thing to say, what's the least amount of death benefit that we can get? And what if we can reduce the death benefit so as to limit the mortality charges, limit the costs of insurance? Well, my goodness, we'd have more money available for tax-free growth and tax-free distributions.
You know, one of the things that we want to emphasize is that we can build, with Ron Gilak's help, a real system that takes parts of many of the things that he works with. The managed funds that don't have the floor guarantee but give you the upside for some of your more risk money. The annuities that do provide the floor and cover your income gap. And then these index life insurance contracts that allow you to borrow out your own money, and it's tax-free, and create your own system of how much money you would need to borrow out. Before we go on to the next feature, though, of what might be too good to be true, when you make an arrangement to take out a certain amount of money or borrow out a certain amount of money, is that fixed? Do you have to stick with that? Let's say the next year you win the lottery, you don't need that much money. Can you make changes as to how much you're going to borrow out?
Oh, you have tremendous flexibility. So if one year you need more money, you generally say, okay, well, this is the year I'm going to take more. The next year, if you need less, you take less. You're not locking yourself into a particular rate of income distributions. You've got flexibility, and people like that flexibility. And you know what's so interesting is when I say what I just said to you a minute ago, when I kind of explain this concept to the first time to people, they'll say, like sometimes a wife will turn to a husband and go, what did he just say? Simply because, you know what it is, Adrienne, this vocabulary, this terminology is not familiar to all of us. Like we all know our particular fields of endeavor that we worked in our careers. And then you start looking at these concepts and people say, well, I want tax-free income distributions, or I want a lifetime income guarantee, or I like the idea of harnessing the upside of the market indexes and not having to deal with downside. But what happens is we've got preconceived notions about, well, what is an annuity contract, or what is a life insurance contract? And we have to get those preconceived notions out of the way so we can explore how these things really work and how we can design systems to help get the income that's needed.
You know, some of it is heartbreaking. People will just have a knee-jerk reaction to a word and not look at their real-life situation. And that's what we have been railing against. So just want everybody to know that we have easy worksheets on rongilak.com website. Take a look at them. We've talked about them in webinar 8. And what they do is they're very streamlined, and they simply ask you to write down certain answers to questions about your own life that will show you how much tax-free income you really want and get you started on accomplishing your target goal. All right, Ron, now we've covered this area that there is a floor below which your nest egg cannot go under certain contractual arrangements. We've talked about the possibility of borrowing out if you have an insurance policy as part of your system and using the money for yourself tax-free. But there's a third leg to that, to the system, and that is the unexpected expenses. It might be long-term care, it might be other things, but if it's long-term care, it's going to be expensive. How have you brought into the system some kind of buffer financially in the case when we may need long-term care? And of course, we're not Medicaid eligible, or we don't want to make ourselves Medicaid eligible, and we just have to go on to private pay.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, all of us have worked very hard for what we've accumulated and saved for retirement, and most of us also want to be able to leave a legacy to benefit our children, and in particular our grandchildren. I mean, I'm reminded of that quote from the book of Proverbs that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so recently I was referred a client, very nice woman whose husband had passed away about a year and a half ago, and she's got a $10 million estate, meaning $10 million in assets, but she doesn't want to manage it. And her son and daughter are very active professionals. They don't have time to manage mom's money. And you might say, well, gee, with $10 million, she doesn't have to worry about long-term care. She could pay it herself. And you know what? Her mindset, and this I think is correct, is, well, this is not what my late husband and I worked so hard for, is to spend our money on expenses of catastrophic illness. There's got to be a better way. So whether a client comes in and they're worth $500,000 or whether somebody comes in and they're worth $10 million, if as part of our planning we identify a blind spot that there's no plan in place to deal with the expenses of home health care or assisted living or nursing home later in life, we want to address that issue. So sometimes when we're looking at these life contracts, we can get what's called a chronic illness accelerated benefit rider, which again is a lot of terminology, a lot of words, vocabulary. What exactly does it mean? It means that the death benefit of the policy can be accelerated during a person's lifetime to pay for home health care, assisted living, nursing home care. And what do we know about death benefit proceeds of life insurance? These are income tax-free. So if we're accelerating the death benefit payment, these are generally considered income tax-free as well. So what's wrong with an income tax-free way to pay for long-term care?
Well, it's perfect, and I think perfect is the problem. The fact is we all know that we can guarantee a floor. We can feel much more secure even in a bubble environment, which we have at the time of the recording of this particular webinar. We can borrow out tax-free and create our own income stream with great flexibility. Use it when we need it, don't use it when we don't need it. And we can even build in, without a long-term care policy, the ability to withstand the onslaught of expenses if we have catastrophic illness. And I do want to remind everybody that Ron Gilak works with long-term care insurance. He works with securities. He works with managed funds and so on. But this is what he's discovered in creating a system for the average person who's planning to retire or post-retired. And I have to ask you this question. Are you ready to spend the 15 minutes it takes to get the fear out of retirement, to stop running with the herd? If so, start with a complimentary consultation with Ron Gilak and Associates. Now, you can register for that. You can also register for our next webinar. What kind of team do you need to navigate the shark-infested waters that lie ahead? You can do both. Get your complimentary consultation. Register for your next webinar at ronaldgilak.com. Thanks again, Ron.
Oh, thank you, Adrienne.